Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier. You know, to really understand Nazi Germany, it's important to understand that Nazism was a movement more than just another political party. And the Nazis did not set out to merely control the German people, they aimed to convert them into true believers, sharing the same values and ideas as the Nazis. Things such as racial purity, national solidarity and militarism, and with that the psychological preparation for war, as well as total faith in Hitler as their leader. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. So, for the Nazis, propaganda aimed to convert. As Goebbels himself put it, the essence of propaganda consists in winning people over to an idea so sincerely, so vitally, that in the end they succumb to it utterly and can never escape from it. So, whether it was a matter of control or conversion, in order to make sure every part of German culture was carefully controlled, Goebbels formed separate chambers within his Ministry for Propaganda for newspapers, radio, film, theatre, music, literature and art. Germans wanting to work in these areas had to become members of the chamber, and that membership depended on giving support to the Nazi movement. Though censorship was also a tool that the Nazis used. Newspapers in the 1930s were nearly all local papers, which did not make it easy to control them. But any unfriendly newspaper was closed down. Magazines and journals too. And the editor's law made editors personally responsible for their paper's content, which left them acting as the party's censors. A clever way of controlling so many local newspapers. Also, Nazi versions of major events were handed to newspaper editors. Radio was a very important means of receiving news in the 1930s. You could liken it to the television and the internet today. Consequently, the Nazis produced a cheap radio, known as the People's Receiver, and as a result, the number of radios in German homes shot up so that 70% of households had a radio. Radios and speakers were also placed in factories and cafes, and loudspeakers installed in squares and on streets too. The message had to reach the people. Listening to the BBC carried a death penalty. The People's Receiver was unable to receive foreign stations. Goebbels made sure that many of the programmes on the radio were entertaining. Otherwise, people would literally turn off. But of course, the key purpose as far as the Nazis were concerned behind increasing access to the radio was to use it for propaganda purposes. As for literature, every book required the ministry's approval before it could be published. The kind of subjects the Nazis favoured included books about race, vilifying the Jew, the glory of war and the heroic German on the battlefield, the glory of the Nazi movement too. The books of authors hostile to Nazi ideals or the work of Jews were removed from public libraries. The works of over 2,500 writers were officially banned. In May 1933, Berlin students set fire to a huge pile of some 20,000 books. It was much the same with theatre. The content of plays needed to fit with Nazi ideals. Music didn't carry the kind of direct message that the written word did, but nevertheless it had its own influence. Consequently, Jewish composers were banned, as was jazz or Negro music. The preference was for German folk music, marching music, and German composers, above all, Hitler's favourite, Wagner. Art didn't necessarily carry a direct message either, but what the Nazis described as degenerate art, including abstract, modern art, as well as anything produced by Jews, was banned, and an emphasis placed on the depiction of the ideal family, strong heroic Aryans, and military subjects. Cinema had become very popular. Both Goebbels and Hitler were big fans too. Foreign films were shown. Goebbels gave Hitler a Christmas present one year of 12 Mickey Mouse cartoons. But they were carefully censored. The Nazi film industry produced around 100 films a year, but as we've noted with the radio, Goebbels was astute enough to accept that if they were all filled with blatant propaganda, the German people would quickly become cynical and bored and would stop going to the cinemas. Therefore, he was careful to make sure that most of the films produced were of the normal fare: love stories, musicals, comedies, or else adventure films or thrillers, though others did have nationalist, racial, as well as military themes, and anti-communist and pro-Nazi themes too. Well, the newsreels which preceded feature films in those days were full of the greatness of Hitler and the massive achievements of Nazi Germany. The Eternal Jew, an anti-Semitic documentary, is a famous example of film used as blatant propaganda. Triumph of the Will and the Olympia films were famous examples of films used to show the Nazi movement and its achievements in a positive light. So, a useful overview for you, I hope, as to how the Nazis got their message across to the German people. As for effectiveness, I've already posted a video on that, but I hope this proves useful for you too. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget my website, History Made Easier. That's there to help you too. But for this presentation, I'm just about finished. Good luck with your studies. Cheers.